By early morning, the trading floor glow had already turned the glass walls of Halcyon Ledger Bank into a shrine for ambition. I used to joke that the place had two currencies: money and applause. Money paid the bills. Applause kept otherwise sensible adults competing over cold pastries and fake smiles. My name is Lana Pike. I was 36, wore tailored Navy-like armor, and knew the mortgage division better than the executives who claimed they built it. Every quarter, the bank paraded the top performers through the office as if we were racehorses with better hair. I was always up there, top 5, without fail. Usually, top 3. I did not charm clients with golf stories or call them sweetheart. I read every tax return, every title issue, every disclosure, every debt ratio, and I knew exactly how to close a mortgage without leaving a legal mess behind for underwriting to mop up. That quarter, management got clever. They gathered us in the conference room sometime in the early morning, under a screen full of charts and self-importance, and unveiled what they called a performance accelerator. The VP of Regional Production, Owen Brisk, stood at the front in a polished gray suit, smiling like a man who had never checked a compliance manual himself. He announced that anyone who placed in the top 5 for sales would receive 5% of the profit on each mortgage assigned. Not funded. Assigned. That was the word on the slide. Assigned. My pen stopped moving. Most people heard the number and nearly floated off their chairs. I heard the legal flaw. Profit participation tied to assigned loans could become expensive fast if the volume was real, and mine was very real. I kept my pipeline clean, my fallout low, and my clients loyal. I did not need luck. I needed a calculator. Back at my desk, I pulled my records, the internal profit margins, and the assignment ledger that every smart producer kept for self-defense. When I finished, I leaned back and stared at the figure on my screen. $725,000. I ran it again because I believe in verification more than celebration. Same result. Then once more, because large sums deserve suspicion. Same result again. Across the aisle, Cami Voss was painting gloss onto her lips using her monitor as a mirror. Cami was the kind of rep who treated rules as decorative suggestions. She flirted with branch managers, forgot document deadlines, and somehow remained buoyant through disasters that would have buried anybody else. Her numbers were rarely strong. Her talent lived elsewhere. She noticed my spreadsheet and gave me a sugary smile. "You look intense." "I look employed," I said. She laughed as if I had complimented her. For the rest of the quarter, I worked like a woman building her own escape tunnel. I closed deal after deal, made detailed notes on every loan assignment, and forwarded every compensation email to my personal archive. Women in banking learn eventually that memory is nice, but metadata is better. When quarter end passed, my totals were undeniable. Even my manager, Rita Snow, glanced at my report and whistled under her breath. "You are safely in the top 3. "Safely is my favorite adverb," I said. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I felt the tiny itch that arrives when powerful men overpromise in public. I had seen enough compensation plans rewritten after the work was done. Enough bonuses called discretionary after being presented as guaranteed. Enough women told to be team players while lesser men were paid like conquerors. So I printed the announcement slide, saved the email, documented my numbers, and sent one tidy note to payroll asking when the profit participation payout would post. No answer. That silence sat with me all weekend like a draft under a locked door. By the time Monday arrived, I knew 2 things. My calculations were correct. And when money gets quiet inside a bank, somebody is already lying. The payout day arrived with none of the usual circus. No balloons, no tray of muffins no one actually wanted. No executive strut through the sales floor pretending generosity was a leadership style. The office felt unnaturally normal, which in banking is another word for dangerous. I walked in sometime in the morning with my leather folder tucked under my arm and watched people click through emails, answer calls, and sip overpriced tea as if this was any other workday. My bonus should have landed by then. $725,000 does not sneak into a payroll account unnoticed. It arrives like thunder. Instead, there was quiet. Then the email hit. Heads popped up all over the room. Chairs rolled back. People laughed, clapped, even cheered. I opened the message and felt the blood drain out of my face so swiftly I could have chilled champagne. Congratulations to this quarter's top 5 mortgage performance leaders. My name was not there. Cami Voss was. I read the list once, then again, not because I doubted my eyesight, but because fraud has its own absurdity. At the top sat 2 expected names, then a mediocre producer from suburban branches, then Cami, then a junior rep who had spent half the quarter asking me how to structure condo deals. Cami stood up with a squeal and tossed her hair. "Well," she called across the room, loud enough for the floor to hear. "Looks like you did not place this time. Nice try, though." Nice try. I had originated more business before lunch on a slow week than she had in some full months. A few people winced on my behalf. One of the processors looked down at her keyboard as if she had just witnessed a minor crime, which she had. I opened the attached sales summary. My numbers were there, but not my real numbers. Whole clusters of my assigned mortgages were missing, not canceled, not reclassified, missing. Rita came to my desk pale as printer paper. "Lana, I am so sorry." "For what exactly?" I asked, very softly. She glanced toward the glass offices. "I thought you knew." That sentence can change the temperature of a hallway. I stood, took the printout, and walked toward the corridor outside the executive suites. I was not storming. Storming is messy. I was collecting facts. Women are often told that anger ruins credibility. That is only true when anger is unsupported by records. As I turned the corner, I found the reason. Owen Brisk had Cami pinned lightly against the wall, one hand at her waist, kissing her like a man who believed consequences were for other people. She laughed into it, lazy and pleased, and he murmured something that ended with, "You earned it." I stopped. They saw me at the same moment. Owen jerked back. Cami straightened her blouse with zero shame and a great deal of practice. For a second, nobody spoke. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Somewhere behind me, a copier whined, painfully ordinary. Then I smiled. It startled Owen more than outrage would have. "Interesting incentive structure," I said. He opened his mouth to produce executive nonsense. I did not stay to hear it. I had enough already. A public compensation promise, missing assignments, a suspiciously favored employee, a VP with his tongue halfway through a governance failure. Back at my desk, I closed my laptop, opened my private email archive, and began building a timeline. Announcement language, my production numbers, assignment logs, payroll inquiry. Each of the results email, witnesses, observation of improper relationship with direct influence over compensation. Then I did what frightened dishonest employers most. I read the policy manual, conflict of interest, nepotism and favoritism, sales compensation governance, record retention, escalation procedures, anti-retaliation language, arbitration clause, whistleblower reporting channels. I highlighted every section that mattered. Cami kept basking in congratulations as if glitter could survive an audit. Owen remained in his office with the blinds tilted shut, which was almost artistic. By late afternoon, I had stopped feeling humiliated. Humiliation is useful only for a moment. Then it should be refinanced into strategy. I was not going to scream on the sales floor. I was not going to beg. I was not going to march into human resources and offer them the chance to protect him before me. I was going to make sure every person with legal exposure understood exactly how expensive kissing in a hallway could become. A bank teaches you many things if you pay attention: interest rate psychology, the comedy of executive jargon, the fact that people who misuse power almost always leave a paper trail because they mistake access for intelligence. By sometime the next morning, I had assembled enough documentation to choke a conference table. I printed my full assignment ledger from the quarter and cross-checked it against the summary used for the bonus rankings. 12 high-profit loans had vanished from my credited production. Not from the system entirely, which would have required bolder sabotage. They had been reassigned in the compensation report layer, cleanly enough to fool anyone lazy, badly enough to delight anyone thorough. Several landed under Cami. I nearly admired the confidence. It takes real arrogance to steal from the woman who color codes her evidence. I did not confront payroll. Payroll follows instructions and survives by pretending not to understand context. I went to a better source: compliance operations. Not the hotline yet. Not human resources. I wanted raw data first, before the institution had time to perfume the room. I called Theo Lin in audit review, an old colleague with excellent posture and a personality like sharpened glass. "Theo," I said, "how hypothetical are you feeling?" "Not very." "Perfect. I need a report showing loan assignment changes by user ID on the sales comp feed for the last quarter." He was quiet a beat. "That is not a casual request. Neither is compensation fraud." He exhaled slowly. "Send me the loan numbers." Within the hour, he had enough to confirm what I already suspected. The changes were made late in the quarter from an executive override credential. Not Cami. Owen. There it was. Not rumor. Not female intuition. The phrase men use when they are hoping evidence will go away. Evidence. I thanked Theo and saved his note outside the bank system. Always outside. Internal files are like garden parties. Lovely until someone decides to rearrange them. At lunch, Rita slipped into the chair across from me in the empty break room. "Whatever you are planning, be careful." "I am being meticulous." "Careful was yesterday." She rubbed her temple. "Human resources will bury this." "Maybe, but buried things have a habit of becoming discoverable." That made her look up. "Most people think leverage is volume. It is not. Leverage is forcing the other side to imagine a courtroom. Leverage is knowing which facts travel well under oath. A compensation promise advertised to drive performance can be treated very differently once employees reasonably rely on it. Selective tampering turns ugly fast. Add an undisclosed romantic relationship between the approving executive and the beneficiary, and suddenly, the legal department sits up like a dog hearing the treat bag. I drafted my complaint that afternoon. Not emotional, not theatrical, ruthless and polite. I stated the bonus program terms as presented. I summarized my documented sales and assignment totals. I identified the discrepancy in credited mortgages. I referenced the audit indication of executive override changes. I reported my direct observation of an intimate relationship between the VP and a participant whose compensation ranking he controlled. I cited policy sections on conflicts, accurate books and records, retaliation, and compensation governance. Then I requested preservation of all relevant emails, messages, access logs, compensation records, and hallway camera footage. Camera footage. That line was my little diamond bracelet. Before sending it, I added one last sentence. I am prepared to pursue all available contractual and statutory remedies if this matter is not investigated promptly and my earned compensation corrected in full. Then I sent it to legal, ethics, internal audit, and a private employment attorney whose website used the phrase executive compensation disputes with a refreshing absence of pastel. By late afternoon, the office energy had changed. Owen stopped strolling. Cami stopped crowing. Two people from legal arrived without smiling. That was when Cami finally came to my desk. "You are making a huge deal out of nothing," she said. I looked up at her. You spelled $725,000 in a very creative way. Her jaw tightened. This will backfire on you. Maybe, I said, but not before it backfires on you. By the next day, Halcyon Ledger Bank looked like a wedding venue after the bride learns about the bridesmaid. Nobody ran, but everyone moved with the alert stiffness of people who sensed an explosion and hoped to stand just outside the blast radius. Legal placed Owen on administrative leave sometime in the early morning. The announcement used the usual sterile language about interim leadership and business continuity, which is corporate dialect for one of our expensive men, has become inconvenient. Cammy called in sick. That alone almost made me laugh. My attorney, Dana Fenn, met me by video from an office lined with tidy books and zero sentimentality. She was compact, silver-haired, and had the expression of a woman who had reduced many executives to quieter versions of themselves. "You did well," she said after reading my packet. "You documented reliance, damages, tampering, and conflict. Most people bring outrage. You brought exhibits. I was raised to label my folders. Your parents did excellent work." Dana explained the landscape with the kind of clarity banks never offer employees. If the compensation program was framed as discretionary in the formal plan documents, the bank would lean on that word like it was holy scripture. But public representations, performance-based terms, and internal records could still matter. If assignments were altered to deprive me of earned compensation while favoring a romantically involved subordinate, the bank had exposure far beyond a bruised ego. Wage claims, misrepresentation, retaliation if they sidelined me, possibly broader governance issues if the books and records were manipulated. Knowledge is a marvelous sedative. Once you know the terrain, fear loses posture. By midday, legal requested an interview. Dana attended with me. So did my calm voice, my printed exhibits, and my refusal to fill silence with nervous chatter. They asked when I learned of the discrepancy. I answered. They asked whether I was certain about what I observed in the hallway. I answered that unless the bank had recently redefined kissing as a compliance exercise, yes. Dana did not smile, but one of the junior lawyers coughed into his hand like laughter had attempted a jailbreak. They asked whether anyone had retaliated against me. Not yet, I said. But thank you for asking on the record. That landed. Over the following stretch, more details surfaced. Owen had overridden not only my assignment credits, but two smaller producers as well, just enough to create room in the rankings. One of them had stayed silent out of fear. The other had assumed she made a spreadsheet mistake. This is how theft survives in offices. It counts on women to doubt their arithmetic before they doubt a man in a tailored suit. Then came the message that split the floor open. Cammy had not merely benefited from favoritism. She had bragged about it in internal chat. Not elegantly, not even cleverly. One note described Owen as making sure the numbers reflected who was loyal. Another joked that she finally found a better use for mentorship. There are few sounds sweeter in corporate life than the click of self-incrimination. Settlement talks started quickly after that. The bank did not want litigation. Banks rarely do when discovery threatens to read like an indecent novel with bonus tables attached. Dana negotiated while I kept working. It's because competence is the most insulting perfume to wear while your enemies unravel. Colleagues who once avoided my gaze now stopped by with hushed loyalty. Rita squeezed my shoulder and whispered, "I should have backed you sooner." "You can start now," I said. She did. So did others. By late afternoon one day, a revised compensation statement arrived in my secure inbox. My original numbers had been restored. My bonus was owed in full, with additional compensation under a confidential resolution being finalized. Owen would not return. Cammy had resigned, which was generous phrasing for being escorted from the story by her own vanity. I stared at the figure for a long moment, not because the money was abstract, because it was not. It was a house without financial anxiety, a trust for my mother, cash reserves, freedom, proof. Women are often told to fight for dignity as if dignity and dollars live in separate neighborhoods. They do not. The money landed quietly, which suited me just fine. Triumph does not need confetti when wire confirmations exist. After taxes and legal fees, the amount was still enough to alter the architecture of my life. I did not celebrate by buying something foolish with a logo large enough to announce emotional instability. I celebrated like a woman who understood risk. I met with an estate lawyer and built a revocable trust. I updated my beneficiary designations because lazy paperwork is how families lose fortunes in probate court. I increased my liability coverage, parked a healthy reserve in treasuries and short-term instruments, and bought a sunlit townhouse under terms I negotiated myself after correcting 3 pages of seller-friendly nonsense in the contract. There is a special pleasure in watching a smug listing agent realize the woman across the table actually reads indemnity clauses. My mother cried when I told her I had set aside money for her care if she ever needed help. Not because she wanted saving, because she knew what it meant for a daughter to build options instead of prayers. At work, I stayed long enough to collect every dollar owed and watch the mythology rot off the walls. Halcyon Ledger rolled out new governance measures, mandatory conflict disclosures, compensation audits, and a whistleblower training session so earnest it nearly qualified as performance art. Executives who had ignored me for years now spoke with delicate respect, as if I might carry a subpoena in my handbag. They were not entirely wrong. Rita got promoted after helping clean up the division. Theo received a formal commendation that pretended bravery was always valued there. Dana sent me a bottle of sparkling water with a note that read, "Well-documented women are expensive to mistreat." I framed it in my mind. And Cammy? I heard she tried to land at another lender and discovered that charm travels poorly once people start calling references who know where the bodies are filed. Owen, meanwhile, disappeared into that soft private fog where disgraced men go to describe consequences as politics. On my final day, sometime in the early morning, I cleared my desk into 2 elegant boxes and took one slow look around the sales floor that had fed on applause and called it culture. I felt no urge to make a speech. Nothing clarifies power like leaving on your own terms. As I headed for the elevator, a junior rep hurried after me. Her name was June. Smart eyes, nervous posture, excellent instincts trying to survive bad management. "How did you know what to do?" she asked. I considered that. "I kept records," I said. I believed math. I did not let embarrassment make me quiet. And I learned that if someone promises you money at work, you save the promise before they remember how expensive it is. She gave a shaky laugh. "That sounds obvious when you say it." Most useful things do. The elevator doors opened. I stepped inside with my boxes and my unshaken spine. The mirrored walls threw my reflection back at me. Navy suit, steady face, woman intact. As the doors closed, as I thought about the kiss in the hallway that had been meant as secrecy, indulgence, reward, it had turned out to be a receipt. That was the funny thing about corrupt people. They believe they are writing their own victory scene, never noticing they are handing the sharpest woman in the room a better ending. I walked out into the day richer, wiser, legally tidier, and far less patient with men who thought women should be grateful just to compete. They had tried to demote me into silence. Instead, they funded my exit.